Hello and welcome. Hi, I'm Dave, and this tutorial is part of a Learn React tutorial series. I'll put a link in the description to the full playlist. Okay, today we're talking about useContext and the Context API. We're not adding any new functionality to our blog application. We're just going to refactor to useContext instead of drilling props down, because that can become unwieldy, and we can see really that our app.js is full of code. We've put in all of our logic as well, and so we've just been passing it all down. This, once again, might not be the most efficient, but it's certainly helped you learn how to pass props down to components, and we've been drilling those props, as the statement goes. However, we're going to eliminate all of that today by refactoring, and we'll have a much neater app.js file, and we'll be able to subscribe to context and use the useContext hook to pull that information in. So let's get started. We'll highlight our source folder in the file tree, and here I'm going to create a new folder and call this folder context. Inside the context folder, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call this data context. You can have more than one context per application. I'm just going to create one today as we have a small application. But imagine having a user section where the user entered information, for example, and you might want a completely separate context where you manage state with that. Here we're going to go ahead and start with an import statement, and we need create context. I'm going to import this from React, so while I'm here I'm going to go ahead and import useState and useEffect as well, because we'll be using those inside of our context. Now, from VM is not correct. I want from React. And now that we have that, I want to go ahead and define my data context. I'm going to set this equal to create context that we just imported, and this will have an empty object inside to start out with. From there, say export const, and I'll define our data provider that will provide the data to our different components. And here we'll have a parentheses, and then inside is a destructured children. And this will refer to the components that are within the data provider. And then the data will be available to the children of the data provider. So now that we have defined our data provider, let's go ahead and put a return statement in it. And inside the return, we'll have a data context dot provider, and here we'll have a value. And now two curly braces, and I'm going to go ahead and press enter to have an extra line, and then we can close this out with a greater than symbol. But this is where we'll put the different values. What have been props that we've been passing down, we can now pass through the data context dot provider, and our data provider will provide it to the different components as we request them with the useContext hook. And so we'll add all of that in just a minute. Right now, let's finish this, and here we need to have children in the JSX. And after that, we need to close out the data context.provider in the JSX. We can save that much, and I have that formatted, but we still need export default data context here at the bottom. And after we save that, we really have our skeleton for our data context. We need to move state and anything else we want in here that we will provide through the data provider. Let's go back to the app.js, and now we need to import our data provider, and this will come from / our new context folder, and inside the context folder is the data context. And now we can use the data provider to provide data to any of these components. Right now, of course, it's still a little large here as we have all the different props that we're drilling down. We will clean this up in a little bit, but what I want to do is just essentially put the data provider here around all of the components. And then the components within can subscribe at will to the data provider. Now that we have that, I'm just going to highlight everything and tab them in, because the data provider would be a parent to all of the components within. And we can save that. Now the data that comes from our context from the data provider will be available to all of the components within if we choose to pull it in using the useContext hook. Let's go ahead and scroll up here in the app.js and start moving some of our state and information over to our data context while we still leave it here as well so we can keep the app working during the transition here as we refactor. So I'm going to highlight everything after the components here. So I've got the route switch and history from React Router DOM and everything below it except the data provider. And so down to Axios fetch, I'm going to copy all of that and put these import statements in our data context as well. Now, of course, we don't need the use state and use effect from React. We've already got that. We won't need the route and switch, but we will have use history here. And then we've got format. Now, when we get to our API, we have to consider where this file is. We have data context inside a context folder, so that's different. We need to come up out of the folder with 2 dots, and then we'll have the API, and then the posts, and the same for the hooks. So we just need to add a dot in front of each one of these, so there's 2 dots, and that should be good. Once we save that, we can go back to the app.js and start to grab the rest of this information as well. So let's grab all of the state that we have here. Let's grab the Axios fetch, the 2 use effects as well, copy all of that, Control C since I'm on Windows, and now inside the data provider, we can paste that right in, just like we had it in our app, except now it's in the data provider. And of course, we've left it in the app for now just to keep the application working. We can also take all of this logic, the handle submit, handle edit, and handle delete, copy that, and put it in the context as well. Now, if you have a little bit of experience with React, you may be thinking, wait, what is he doing? Well, right now we're just dumping it all. Everything that we had in the app.js, we're putting in the data context. We can get a little more organized later. We can think about efficiency some. This is a small app. React is already very efficient, but we'll talk about some of those things here in the future. Right now, just taking all of that stuff we had in app.js and we're moving it into our data context. And now at the bottom, we're not providing anything yet, but we will. Right now, we've left everything here as well. So let's scroll down in the app.js. And the first thing we have is the header. You can see the header is receiving a width prop as well as the title. We'll leave the title here because you don't have to go all one way or the other. You can still pass a prop down like the title while pulling a prop like width from the context. So that's what we're going to do. Back here in the data context, we've already defined width above. So let's put width right here. If we provide more data, I'll need to put a comma after that. But we already have width defined, I believe. Yes, we do, right up here on line 19 in the context. And so now we're passing it through from the provider. And now let's look at the header file. In order to use width from the context, instead of being passed in as this prop, which we can remove from the destructure here, let's go ahead and use an import at the top, and this will be to pull in useContext, and that will be as the other hooks from React. And then we also need to import our data context that we defined. There we go, it already helped me out, from the context / data context. Now that we have those, we need to define width since we're no longer pulling it in as a prop above. So this will be const and then width, and then this will be set equal to use window size. Oh, I'm sorry, not use window size. That's where we're pulling it from in data context. This will be equal to use context, and that will be from the data context. So if you had more than one context, you can see now how you import it and you would pass it in to the use context hook. And we want the data context, so we pass that in to the use context hook here, and we get width. It's no longer being passed down, but much in the same way, we're defining it near the top of our function here, just using the use context hook. And we can save this, and now if we go to the application, the width should still be working, and we still have an icon there. We can go ahead and refresh to see if we have a problem. No problem. I'm going to open up DevTools and even resize. And yes, it already resized to a tablet. Let's go ahead and scroll, and it's a phone size, it's a tablet size soon, there we go, and then a laptop. Yes, I'm not going to worry about the warnings right now. We've defined many things that aren't being used, but we'll continue to switch each component over, and we'll slowly eliminate warnings and errors as they arise. Okay, back to Visual Studio Code. I'm going to copy this useContext import, and DataContext will need that at the top of every component that uses a context subscription. And so now, besides the header, let's look at app.js. We can eliminate this width as well. Now we want to go to the nav, and it receives search and set search. So I'll save the app, and let's open up the nav file. I'll need to paste these two imports at the top, same as we had before with the header. And then we also want to take a line like this that uses the context and put it into our nav. And you'll see a pattern emerge here where we're no longer destructuring as props, but we can just put the same props right inside of the use context as we use the hook. And so then we can eliminate these props here in the function parentheses. Okay, if we go back to the app.js, now we should be able to eliminate search and set search from the nav. We can already see how this is cleaning up a little bit. Now we see home receives posts, fetch error, and is loading. And we also need to pass search and set search in the context. If you remember, in our data context, we had only passed width before, so we need to remember to do these as we pass everything along. And now we said our next one, home, is going to receive search results, even though we labeled it as posts here. It's search results, fetch error, and is loading. So let's set search results, fetch error, and is loading. Let's save that much, and let's go ahead and pull up the home component. Okay, we'll need to once again copy from header, or if you just memorize the imports and type them, that will work as well. But we've got useContext imported and our data context. And now also in the header, we'll need to use context and pull out what we need from it. And again, even though this says posts, that's because we had labeled it that before it came in. So we'll need to switch that to search results. If I can highlight it all, there we go, search results. Let's eliminate the props that were being destructured there. And now inside of our function, we need to change a couple of things, because this should no longer be posts, it would be search results. And the feed, even though they'll be labeled as posts after, it receives the search results as posts. And we can save that. So now we have received all of these with context, and we did the same with the nav, and we received those here with the context. And then of course in our data context, we had to provide all of those values here. Let's go back and see if our application is working. It looks like it's working. Let's do a reload. So far, don't worry about the warnings. Of course, we've got many things defined right now that aren't being used yet. We can still search. So everything is working as expected. So we're just replacing just a little bit of each component as we go. Let's go ahead and minimize Chrome. If we head back to the app.js, we can eliminate some more here. We have now eliminated all three of these props that were being drilled down to the home component. And if you remember, some of the components, we were able to eliminate all of those, and when they didn't have any props being sent to some of the components, we were able to just specify inside of the route which component we were routing to, like this. And so that's much cleaner. Now let's look at the NewPost component that receives even more props. I'll save. I'm going to go ahead and close up the open editors at the top so we have a little more room here, and we want to scroll down and choose the NewPost.js. You can see it's receiving 5 different props that are being drilled down. So once again, I'm going to go to the header file, copy these 2 import lines, then go back to the NewPost, and at the top it had no imports before. We'll import both of those lines, and then we'll take our useContext line as well, go into the NewPost, paste that in, and then take everything that we were receiving as props, and we'll receive those from the context. And now we'll eliminate what we were deconstructing and save, and we should still have all the same functionality because nothing else has changed. It's just in how we receive that data. Let's go back to app.js. Let's go ahead and remove everything here, including the closing route, and we'll just use the component and pass in NewPost. And we'll save. Now let's go to our application. And let's go reload once again just to make sure everything should already be fine. Let's go to NewPost and let's call this post 5. Oh, and you know what we forgot to do? We've got an error here. Set post title is not a function, and that is because we didn't take all of those props and send them through the provider yet. So this is what we need to make sure we have done. Handle submit, post title, post body, and set post body. We'll go to our data context and make sure all of these are being sent through the provider. And once we save, we should be able to go back and without error, reload the app. I'll go back to home and reload the entire thing just to make sure. Let's have a new post. And we'll say post 5, just checking, submit, and yes, we have post 5 just checking. So if you get that error, just like I did, you'll know what is happening. You need to make sure you're sending those same pieces of state and maybe even like the handle submit function. So maybe even some logic being sent through the data provider if that is how you are providing it to the component. Let's minimize Chrome. And we're back here at the data provider. Now let's go back to app.js and we'll clean up the next one, which is EditPost. You can see it's receiving probably more than any other component was. And so we'll need to make sure we're sending all those same props through the data provider. Let's go ahead and change this right now to just have a component. It says EditPost. We'll save that, which will break the app momentarily. Let's go to the EditPost file, and I'm just going to open up nav.js this time, copy those same 2 lines. I'll go into EditPost, and I'm noticing at the top I'm already importing useEffect from React, so I don't really need the separate useContext line. I can just put useContext in the same line there. After that, I'll go back to the nav again, and we're going to go ahead and copy that useContext hook line. And once we're inside the function here, I'll put the useContext line. I'll cut everything out that was received as a prop and put it into the useContext line here. Eliminate the curly braces from where props were received and save. Now everything should be okay, except we need to make sure all of this is being passed in the data provider as well. So we'll put a comma after the set body and we'll paste. We'll make sure we don't have any duplicates here. We have posts, handle edit, edit body. It looks good, so we can save that. I believe we've already made the changes in the app.js. Yes, for edit post. Let's once again go to our application. Let's pick our new post 5. Let's edit the post and change the 5 to the word 5 and just checking in. And we'll submit. And yes, edit post works just fine. Let's go ahead and minimize Chrome. Not much left to go on this initial refactor, but we've got one more component that is receiving some props here, our post page. So let's scroll down to the post page. Let's once again copy our import lines for useContext and data context. And on the post page, we can put those right here. Now we'll go ahead and copy the useContext line for the hook back on the post page again. We'll put that right underneath here, and then we'll take posts and handle delete, and we'll paste those in here and remove the curly braces. And now we need to make sure posts and handle delete are already in the data context. And if we select data context, post was already here, but not handle delete. So let's go ahead and add that as well and save. I'm going to close a file or two at the top just so we can see the ones that we want to have open. Here's app.js, and now we can change this up as well and make it the component. Close out the route. And if we look at our app.js file now, it is much, much cleaner. The data provider surrounds everything. And of course, we have our routing in here that we previously had, including our switch statement. But even up above, we haven't removed these, but we will be able to now because you notice we're not passing any of them down whatsoever. There are currently no props being passed other than what we have for our route, and we're saying, hey, this is what the component is. So that is much cleaner. Let's make sure our application is working. So we'll reload. Let's go to post 5. Looks like we can still edit the post. I'll remove in here. That's good. We can delete the post. It deleted, no problem. We should be able to search. So if we search for 3, yes, everything in the application seems to be working just fine. Let's minimize in Chrome. And now let's go ahead and remove everything that we really don't need in the app.js file. I'm going to remove use history as we now have that in the context. We won't be using state or use effect or any of the rest of these except the data provider. So what we're left with are the components, route and switch then from React Router, and our data provider. We're able to remove all of these pieces of state and use effect. We should be able to remove all of the different functions. We have handle submit, handle edit, and handle delete. And we can save, and now our app.js is much, much smaller. So we're importing in the components, the routing, and the context. And look at this function. It is so much smaller and easier to manage than what we previously had as we were drilling all of those props. Let's once again go to our application, reload, and make sure it's working. But it sure looks like it is. And so now we're using context for all of those things. Let's minimize Chrome again, and let's talk about how we've organized everything. App.js looks much better, and our context here has everything that we previously had in that parent component. And of course, when a parent component renders, then so do the children of the component. So it was causing lots of re-renders. But this still could cause quite a few because everything that subscribes to the context, when the context gets updated, so would the component. So let's think about some of what we're doing, and are we actually doing it as effectively and efficiently as we could? If we go to app.js and once again look at each component, we could stop and think that really the header does not need to receive any of the post data. It's only receiving this title prop, and then we're passing a width to it, if you remember, and that determines the icon for the header alone. So it doesn't really need to be involved with the rest of this. Likewise, the footer isn't receiving any data either, and it doesn't need to be there. So we could move our data provider, and we could wrap it around everything starting at the nav and ending it at the switch route, because that is the area that really needs the post data. And so we could save that. I'll eliminate these lines here. And now that we've done that, we need to change the header just a little bit because right now it does depend on that data from the data provider. So let's go back to the header, and we can go ahead and remove these imports. And let's think about how to get the width. Well, it never had to be passed down to begin with. So what we could do with the width is just import the window size hook or use window size. And that would be from hooks slash, and then I believe it's use window size. There we go. And now that we have that, instead of defining width from useContext, we're just defining it from use window size. And that's a very simple change, but that totally decoupled the header from all of the data that was involved with the posts. And we can go back to the data context and we can say we don't need this use window size import anymore. Likewise, we don't need to define width inside the data context from the use window size. And finally, we don't need to pass it down at all. It can just be contained within the component itself. The header component can just use that hook. And really, if we stop and think about some of our other components, some of the data that we previously had in a parent does not need to be passed down either. So handle delete is probably only going to be on the post page where the delete button is. Handle edit, well, that's probably only going to be on the page where the edit is. And handle submit, probably only on the new post page where we submit a new post. So let's go look at the new post page. And on the new post page, if we stop and think about it, this post title and post body, along with the set functions, is really only linked to this form. It has no other role in the application. So that could just be state that we keep within this component without sending it to a context, because it doesn't need to be shared with other components. And really that's what the context would all be about. So at the top, let's just import useState, and let's go back to our data context and we'll copy those lines where we had the post body and post title, and we'll just cut those right out of here, and we'll go back to the new post and we'll take these and we'll set them at the top, and we can eliminate all of the post body and post title that were imported. And now the same with handle submit. This is the only place that that function is called. We might need some other state that is used inside of handle submit, but we could easily import that from the context. So let's go back and grab that function as well. And let's find handle submit. Here it is. We'll take this and just cut it out of our context, and we'll take it to the new post component and paste it in. And now that we have a handle submit here as well, we know we won't need it, but I'm not going to get rid of the use context line because handle submit probably has something else we need related to posts. Everything else is looking good there. So now let's go ahead and look at this function. Clearly it uses posts, so we're going to need the posts from context. It also has set posts. And does it have anything else we'll need? No, set post title and set post body are now contained within. It looks like we're going to need to import the use history from React Router though. So let's go ahead and do that. Import use history from React Router DOM. And then we'll need to define our history to be able to use it. We'll set that equal to use history and save, and we'll see if our function will continue to work. It also has an API call in here. So if we're going to use the API, we do need to import that into the function as well. So we can import API from ./API/posts. There we go. And save. Now we have the API in here to make the API call and handle submit as well. And everything else looks good. So we have our handle submit function, and we're containing the state within the component that really doesn't need to be shared, and we're pulling in the state that does need to be shared between components, and here that is posts. Let's save this. We'll go back to our context, and we already removed the function, and we already removed the state that we won't be using here, but let's go down, and what we do need to do is remove the post title, post body, and everything that we had right here for that, because it no longer needs to be passed through the provider. If we go back and now look at our application, we've got an import which falls outside of the project, and that is the use hooks. That must be in the header.js. Let's go ahead and fix that import. It looks like I have an extra dot in there. And let's give this another shot. Our NewPost.js needs the format import that we also have in context, so let's grab that as well. Put this in the NewPost component as it's used in the function right here, and I missed that. Now that we've got it, let's go ahead and reload. The blog seems to be working. Let's make that 5th post again. Set posts is not a function, which means we did not send that through the context previously. If we come back, go to our context, I believe we sent posts before, but we never sent set posts. Let's save, go back to our application. I'll once again go to home, refresh just to be safe, new post, 5th post, again, and there is our 5th post, and now everything is working as it should. And it actually looks like the last one did post, so I'll go back and delete it as well. And now we're just left with the last 5th post. I'm going to minimize Chrome, and we can look at the next change. Now that we did that with the new post page, let's go ahead and look at the post page as well and say what can be sent here, or what could be actually contained in the component that doesn't need to be sent here. Well, posts is something that once again needs to be shared amongst all components, but handle delete is really only needed in this component. That is once again logic that could just stay right here. So let's make some room, and we'll go to our data context, and we'll pull out the handle delete. Just cut it right out of the context. And while we're here, we'll go ahead and delete it out of our provider. And I'll eliminate the comma before it. We'll save that, and on the post page, we should be able to paste it right in. But once again, the function may need something that we weren't already bringing in. So let's take a look. Oh, this is handle edit. Wait a minute, I need to put that back for now and get handle delete. Here we go. I'll just save, go back to the post page, paste in handle delete and save. But what are we missing? We are missing the API for sure. So we need to import API from ./API/posts. And after the API, we have set posts coming in. No, we don't yet. So let's go ahead and do that instead of the handle delete that we previously were bringing in from useContext. And now that we have set posts, we're going to need history again from React Router DOM. We already have some from React Router DOM up there. So let's just bring in the history as well. We'll need to define history. I'll do that right here. So we'll say const history equals use history. And now that we have the history, we have set posts, we have the API. I don't think I'm missing anything else, but you never know. We'll go ahead and save that. Let's go back to Chrome and see if our application is still working. We'll try to delete this 5th post. I think I'm going to reload first and attempt to delete. And the delete continues to work. Everything is good. Let's minimize Chrome and keep working. Let's take a look at app.js now. We have already handled the post page and the new post. So what might be logic that would be in EditPost that the rest of the application would need? Let's look at our context. And handle edit, the function for sure. Pretty much what we had here. Handle edit, edit body, edit title, set edit title. Those can all just be contained within the component once again because the rest of the application does not need them. So we'll just remove those here from the context provider. We'll save that. Let's grab the state first, and then we'll come back and get the functions. So all of this state right here is no longer needed inside of our context. We can just move that inside of EditPost. And now that we have EditPost open, we'll put the state right here at the top. And we are going to need to still bring in posts and probably set posts. So we'll once again pass that right there. We've got the use effect here with post, set edit title, set edit body. That is fine. We're already bringing in use effect here. So we need to bring in that function. So let's go back and now grab handle edit, cut that out of our context as well. Go ahead and save the context, but in edit post, we can put the function then right underneath the use effect and save. And let's see what else we still need in here. We're going to need format again. It looks like we'll also need the API, and we're going to need history for sure. Okay, so at the top, we've already got params and link from React Router. Let's get use history. Then let's go ahead and define that history as well. So we'll say const history equals use history. Let's import the API. Import API from ./API/posts and save. So now we have the API, and we still need the format. So was that on the post page? I don't think so. I think it was on NewPost that we had format. There's that import. And we'll put this back on the edit post page. And I think we have everything then needed for the handle edit. Date, time, updated post. So format, API, history, it all looks good. Let's go ahead and see if the app is working as we expect it to. Well, wait a minute. Let's see if we eliminated everything from the context. Yes, it looks like we did. So let's go back and see if the app is working like we expect it to. Oh, there is a problem. Use state is not defined. We can't forget that. At the top of edit post, I believe. Yes, we're going to need that right here. We brought in all that state and forgot to import use state. Now that we have use state imported, maybe everything is going to be working. It sure looks like it. Let's try to edit our fourth post. Some more testing. Let's say words. Press enter, and yes, it is working. With everything now working, we can see we're getting a warning that we've got some definitions inside of context that are no longer being used. And that is because we have pared our context down. So let's look at the context and say we no longer need the API. Well, this is the edit post. Let's go to the context. There we go. We no longer need format or API. And do we still have use history inside of here? No, we are no longer defining history either. So we can remove that as well. And let's look at the line use history. There we go. And save. So now our context is much smaller than it was. The posts and the search are definitely tied into each other, because once we receive the posts, then we have to set the search results based on what, if anything, is being searched for. So this is pretty much our data that we now have. And of course, we get a fetch error is loading, and we're calling our use Axios fetch right here inside the context, because it can be called inside of a function like this in React, or a React function, if you will, not a traditional JavaScript function. But we're just grabbing it right here instead of putting that in the home. So this is working for us right now. And we've contained much of the component logic that's just related to the specific components within those components. Hey, thank you guys so much for liking the video if it helped you get started with React. Also, I appreciate you watching and subscribing. It's helping my channel grow. Take care, and I'll see you again very soon.